right. Looks like we are running. So thank you everyone for coming today to discuss our Aging with Grace series. This is a series that we put together, and I've come at from a bunch of different angles, but I was excited to do this talk today because it really comes down to like the base of why we talk about this stuff and why I think it's important. So this is kind of in my mind, like rejuvenating the series to talk about ways to basically maximize our age while minimizing our debility or disability or senility and things of that nature. So I think it's a very important topic, and one that oftentimes I think the issue is people kind of look at age and senility as the same thing basically. And one of my goals is to help us see that they are different, and there are things that you can do, very reasonable things that you can do to age and maximize your ability level and both physically, mentally, and things of that nature. As with anything, it's never guaranteed, right? But you want to try to stack the deck as much as you can in your favor. So hopefully I can give you some ideas today about how best to do that. So let me share my screen, hopefully. Okay. So it says I'm sharing my screen. If it doesn't look like it to anyone, let me know. So again, we're talking about age and ways as we age, we want to maximize our age while minimizing our senility and disability and things of that nature. So I wanted to start with like common quotes that I hear from people that they've been told or that they just believe and say about aging, because it's kind of all over the map, right? You know, the classic like thing that I hear as people come back from their doctors and things is that their doctors they present a problem to them, and their doctor will say, well, you're getting older, you are getting older, which is not untrue. Age is a thing that moves onward whether we like it or not, but age does not have to be associated with dysfunction. Now it is associated in a way that as we look at a general population of aged people, they have more disease than a population of people that aren't as old. But that's not a guarantee that you are going to become progressively more disabled. And you have to, I guess, the better way of looking at it is it's not something that you have to accept everything as, oh, well, I'm just getting older, right? There are things that happen. We're not as good at balancing as we get older. Absolutely. Like I see that every day. And you can do things to slow that progression down, but you're not going to stop it. Or as on the outside, we get wrinkles as we get older. But when it comes to wrinkles, it depends on what you do with your skin, right? If you expose your skin to heat and sunburn and you never use any moisturizer, you're going to probably be more wrinkly as you get older than somebody that kind of takes better care of it. So the hope here today is just to have a discussion about what we can do to try to maximize what we're getting out of our lives as we get older. It's I hear people say, I'm getting older, but it's better than the alternative. Which I think is just kind of a funny quote, and I don't know if they really mean it or not. But time and tide wait for no man. It's a little bit more, a little bit higher level of thinking there. But and then there's the other side of it where people just say, age is just a number. It doesn't mean anything to me, which I don't think is necessarily true either. So these are different ideas and thoughts that people have on aging, and this talk we're trying to just kind of get to the bottom of what it means to be older versus what it means to have disability associated with it. So senile is having or showing weakness or disease of old age, especially loss of mental faculties. the mental faculty side is kind of tacked on as the way that we interpret this most often in the general communities, but the base of the definition is having or showing the weakness or disease of old age. So it's not necessarily senile, meaning like mental faculties all the time, but generally just becoming more dependent on others, becoming weaker physically. These things are kind of associated with the old age. But then being old is having lived for a long time or no longer younger. So I just wanted to throw these two up there because they are different, right? The definitions are different. We have the weakness and disease associated with old age versus just, being old. So they're not the same thing. We need to make sure we realize that there is a bit of a difference. And as I said a couple of times, my primary objective is to kind of show what this means and how to keep them relatively different as we do get older. So as we look at this graph, we can see this is prevalence of diseases as we get older, right? The diseases that get more common as we get older. We have arthritis, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, COPD, and asthma actually is the only one that goes down with age. So of all these top 5 things that increase as we get older, there's one common trend amongst those diseases, and then that is that they're considered by many as like a mismatched condition, right? So a mismatched condition means that it doesn't match our like body's typical progression of disease. Basically, the result of us treating our bodies in a way that we weren't necessarily designed to be treated in a lot of ways, right? We are feeding it foods that aren't really that healthy for it, or our activity levels are lower than they should be, causing some things to occur in our bodies that lead to diseases that are kind of mismatched with our evolutionary history. Because if we scroll down a little bit, again, now actually, as we scroll down, we're looking here at the prevalence of certain diseases. Let's zoom in on this one a little bit more. There we go. The prevalence of cause of death in males and females, I believe this was from 2020. And you can see heart disease is a huge portion. Cancer, another huge portion. Unintentional injuries, and we go down the road. Stroke, CLRD here is COPD. Basically, it's a larger group of issues with it. But diabetes, all these things that you can see right up here, which are those kind of mismatched conditions, end up being really primary causes of death for many people in our current modernized society. So that's something that we can't ignore, this fact that they don't really match up. And if we're not sure about that, we can look back to data, for historical data, right? So 1998 versus 1900. So about almost 100 years difference here. These are the causes of death in primary, the top causes of death in 1998 looks pretty similar to 2020, to be honest. Diseases of the heart, neoplasms, aka cancers, cerebrovascular disease. So that's just stroke. So these are essentially the same as 2020, but when you jump over and compare them to 1900, you're seeing more of the communicable diseases, right? Like pneumonia, tuberculosis, diarrhea, different issues associated with that. These things are more like the viruses and diseases that resulted from like communication between people, right? And we've done a great job of, it's one of two things have occurred here. We've either done a great job of controlling these diseases, which we have with our better use of vaccinations, our more cleanliness and things of that nature, or these diseases have become more prevalent. And it really breaks down to being a little bit of both when we look at it. But something that we have to understand is that these, for the greater part of human history, one of the main reasons for death were not these diseases of heart disease and cancer and things like that. They were more of these communicable diseases or accidents of some sort. You can see down here saying all accidents. These things were maybe the main reason for death and throughout human history. So then if we move down a little bit further, we can talk about, like, just generally when we boil things down, like, what is aging? Like, what does that even mean when we say something that we're aging, we're getting older? And how do we age? Like, what's happening? Basically, aging is determined by the interaction between injury and repair at a cellular level. So as our cells are used, they become injured, and it depends on our body's ability to repair and rebuild or replace those cells. So as we get older, our body's ability to turn those over declines. They basically die faster than we can repair to make new ones, and then this leads to an increased risk of disease, right? So as we get older, it's not that we won't have disease if we do the right things, but we are increasing our risk for disease as we get older, the same way that we increase our risk for disease if we're obese, the same way we increase our risk for our disease if we are smoking. These things, they're all kind of working on the same level. It's not just one factor that we're dealing with. Age is just a factor in senility, but there are a lot of other factors. And we often look at things as, there are things that we can modify, like modifiable risk factors for issues, and there are things that we can't modify. Things that we can't modify is age. You can't change someone's age, but behaviorally, there's a lot we can change, and that's where I really want to focus here. So focusing on that, like things that we can change, we need to understand that something that we can't change is our genes. Our genes are something that definitely sets us up for some issues, for good and bad, right? And working in my field, I hear it a lot from people. My mom had arthritis, my mom had heart disease, so I'm going to have all of that, which is true. You're probably at a higher risk if she had a genetic predisposition to those issues. But up until you get to the age of 80, genetics contribute 20% to the risk of contracting disease. After age of 80, it goes up and things kind of all bets are off. But up to that age of 80, your genetics give you a 20% chance of contracting a specific disease that would be in your genetic past. So, a lot of the cancers that occurred before the age of 80, that might be kind of genetic based, but it could also, the cancers that occur after the age of 80 are probably maybe more genetic linked versus the cancers that are occurring before, maybe more environmentally linked because of how, you were exposed to certain things throughout your life. So, the quote that I've heard with this is the genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger in some ways. So they might predispose you just enough so that if you expose yourself to certain things in your environment, then that could result in a actual contraction of a disease of some sort. So that the idea of nature versus nurture, prior to the age of 80, your nurture is a little bit more important than the nature of what you were kind of born with. Then another thing that is important to consider is chronic inflammation. So this is a big topic that people talk a ton about, and some people think it's a much bigger deal than others. And but when you really look at the information on aging and what's causing aging, you can't ignore chronic inflammation. You really can't. It is a very likely significant driver of our abilities to avoid or contract these diseases right here: cancer, heart disease, osteoporosis, arthritis, cataracts, Alzheimer's, COPD, which, if we go up here, these are those conditions that I was talking about as being somewhat mismatched with our bodies. And then there are some of the main reasons for death in our country, right? So if we can try to find a way to get a hold of our chronic inflammation, that would go a long way. Now, people always think of, I've actually done some talks here on inflammation before, right? And inflammation in its acute stages, right when it occurs, is really a good thing. That's something we want. We want our body to respond that way. And because when we become inflamed, it brings more tissue to that area, promotes healing. promotes a lot of good things for that issue. So like right after you sprain your ankle, to run as fast as you can to your medicine cabinet and put some Advil in your mouth is probably not your best choice. Again, lots of argument here, but it probably would be something that would make sense to give it some time to become inflamed. As long as it's not limiting your ability to get around, then letting it be inflamed for a few days might make some good sense. Now, chronic inflammation is a different thing. This is something that increases as we age. So our ability to control inflammation is poorer as we age. So we are more likely to be chronically inflamed. But that isn't the only factor here, right? Diet is another big thing with chronic inflammation, which is not an area that I claim to be an expert, but there are experts out there that can really help, whether it's through actual dietary changes, or if it's through some sort of supplements. That those are things that may be worth looking into to get control over that. And just, an easy thing to look at is what kind of food are you eating? Are you eating food that tends to have an ability to help with that, or make it worse, right? The area that I really focus my efforts in, obviously being a physical therapist, is in movement, right? So that's something that has been found to have anti-inflammatory effects on its own. And ironically, it will increase inflammation in local tissues that you exercise, but systemically it can decrease inflammation in the long term. And in fact, that reduction in inflammation lasts for hours into days after activity. So that's something that's really important for us, right? So there are three main factors that can be closely associated with senility as we get older. Just not being, showing that those signs of disease and weakness as we get older. Smoking is a big one. So, it's probably not the best thing for you. Lack of activity and increased body fat. So three, again, going back to those risk factors that are modifiable. We can modify those things. You can increase your activity. You can stop smoking. You can do your best to get control of your body fat. Increasing activity, eating a little healthier, those are the things you need to do. And there's some people that still struggle with controlling your body fat, but that's in these cases where you're successfully achieving 2 out of the 3, you are significantly decreasing your risk still, right? So trying to find some ways to gain control over your the system that you're operating, your body, with those 2 main things, and then maybe that third will come as a result. But you can't just choose tomorrow not to have body fat. That's a little bit more of a commitment. So all that said, with all these things considered, what do we do here? The answer is, like I said before, we move. Got to move. Movement is absolutely vital. Like I said, actually moving causes a decrease in inflammation, and there's some studies out there that moving frequently throughout the day keeps chronic inflammation lower. So spending prolonged times sedentary, without even little movements, like movement snacks is what you would call them, where you just get up and walk around, go to the water fountain. I went to a continuing education course once, and they said that it was on back pain, and they said the presenter said that the first thing he tells all of his patients that have back pain to do is drink a lot of water. And they're all like, "Oh, really? Why is that? Does it help with the fluid in the back and whatnot?" And he said, "No, it just means you're gonna have to get up to pee a lot. So you're going to have to keep moving. These little movement breaks throughout the day can go a long way to stave off that inflammatory process that can occur lingering in the background. That can be associated with some of these onsets of these different diseases like heart disease and arthritis. And if you've heard me talk before about arthritis, again, arthritis has been mistermed a lot as a wear and tear condition. It's more of an inflammatory condition. It's more of we use this joint and we don't give it, or we don't use it well, really. It what occurs is the joint ends up becoming inflamed and our body can't get control of that inflammation, and then it breaks down the cartilage tissue in the joint and resulting in a broken down joint. So this can happen from not using joints, and it can happen from using joints way too much. But if we all fall in this middle ground of using joints a decent amount, then our risk for arthritis, lower body arthritis, is much, much lower. And people that use their joints a lot and get blamed terribly for it are runners. There was a famous runners study done at Stanford that showed that runners are less than half as likely to die from heart disease or other mismatched aging conditions. So versus like a normal community. So that's not just talking about arthritis. This is talking about heart disease and cancer, diabetes, all these things that are kind of mismatched with our current state. And this is huge. I mean, that's you don't have to run to get these results either. And these people in this runner study weren't like world-class runners. They were just like running club. I think it was a running club out in like Palo Alto and Stanford, and then they tracked it over a larger group over time. But just people that enjoyed it, enjoyed getting out and running. And I believe this has been recreated in other groups since then, since this study was done. But it was a pretty popular study that resulted in some good findings to show the importance of just an active lifestyle. Now, of course, in these studies, they don't account for a lot of other variables, right? Like people that are runners generally, eat healthy too, take good care of their bodies, regularly go to the doctors to have other issues ruled out and whatnot. So, it's not a perfect correlation. Running means you will be healthier. Basically, it's just somebody that treats their body a little better than the average are half as likely to die from heart disease or other mismatched conditions. That's really how you should look at this. Not that you need to go out and buy running shoes. And the really neat thing about some of the research that's been done in this world and is that it's never too late to really start being active, right? So studies found that people over the age of 60 are significantly can decrease their risk of mortality if they start to exercise when compared to those who don't. So this is something that is nice to know, right? Like you could start tomorrow. You could start this process tomorrow and give yourself a great opportunity to maximize what you can get out of your life. And the thing is, it's not going to be the same thing for you as it is, Tom down the street. Tom might really, really love swimming. So he might get this benefit of being more active by incorporating more swimming into his life. You might hate water, so you might need to look at it from another perspective. And pickleball, tennis, things like that are maybe great ways to move. But we do know that being sedentary, not moving, can certainly increase your inflammation, increase those inflammatory factors in the body, and can result in some real issues as you move down the road. So trying to find ways to give yourself those like movement snacks throughout the day. And then also give yourself that ability to strive for that 150 minutes, which is always thrown out there. It's a pretty good number, 150 minutes of cardiovascular, moderate level activity a week. And from a cardiovascular perspective, that 150 minutes can occur in one 150-minute block or multiple blocks divided over that week. It doesn't all have to be at once. It could all be at once if you want it. From a bone and joint perspective, I think it's better to put it at 150 minutes divided over the week. And also from the idea of the inflammatory issues, that would be good to divide it over the week too. Like I said, a little extra movement here and there can be really beneficial in those cases. And the idea that we're talking about controlling inflammation through activity The other thing we can do through activity is increase our metabolism. And a form of exercise that increases our metabolism the best is actually strength training. So most people think, oh man, got to lose weight. Better start doing some sort of cardiovascular activity. Not really true. I mean, it can help, but if you compare it to weightlifting, like moderate intensity, reasonably hard weightlifting, that actually results in a bigger boost to your metabolism that is actually lasts over time a little bit longer than just cardiovascular activity. Being last over time meaning you still have an elevated metabolic rate for a longer period after you're done exercising if you are if you're strength training. And that's just because it's a bigger shock to the system, right? You're really breaking down muscle tissue, and the body needs to put more effort into rebuilding that muscle tissue. And therefore it burns more calories, it keeps things elevated a little bit longer, and it results in a little bit more help for you. But when we talk, I guess I could define like mismatched condition a little bit better. When we talk about this idea, like what does that really mean? It means, for the great majority of human history, up until about the Industrial Revolution, we were operating generally at a calorie deficit, right? We didn't have calories just ready for us at all times. So, and anything we did, as far as movement goes, we did to get calories because we needed to survive. Now we have calories everywhere, super dense calories. We've got of like a donut, right? Or we have calories all over the place in forms of sugar, fat, all things that have been demonized at some point or another throughout the dietary trends of the world. And that's what is resulting these conditions of arthritis and heart disease, that they certainly did exist prior to the Industrial Revolution, but they weren't as endemic as they are now. So that's something that is the real big difference. Like when it boils down, is our energy availability is so much better now that we are consuming more energy than is needed, and we're not using it to get the energy appropriately. So we don't have to burn energy to get energy, and therefore we're all getting fat. And so this is something that can be controlled. It's not easy, definitely not easy in our society, right? When there's, man, people bring donuts in here all the time, and it's hard not to eat donuts. I do love donuts, but donuts are a big food that comes to mind in these cases when I'm thinking of like the equations needed to understand nutrition a little bit better. And nutrition is something that is oftentimes made more confusing than it needs to be, in my opinion. In my opinion, it's something that, and sort of in my opinion, but also on my best understanding of the evidence that I've seen, it's really a mathematical equation. It's calories in, calories out. You just need to figure out how many calories you're taking in, and then based on that, determine how many calories you need to put out and control that. The thing is, there's a difference in eating enough food to satiate your like actual hunger, which comes from like kind of what you're feeling in your stomach. Like, do you feel full or does your stomach feel empty? You literally have little nerves around that stomach that sense if that stomach's expanded or not. And as that stomach gets more empty, they say, you probably should eat something. But those nerves there have no idea what type of nutritional value the stuff is that you're eating, right? So the nutritional value is what's going to give you those nutrients, your calories, your fats, all those things. And so you could eat a donut, which has a lot of, it's weird to say, but nutritional value. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and it's not going to expand your stomach at all. But so your brain says, I'm not full, we should eat more. But your body just got about all the sugar it needs for another 3 days in that one donut. And that's oftentimes what happens in these cases, that we don't feel full, so we'll eat more calories and eat more calories. And these things are so calorie dense that we have no idea. There's nothing telling us to stop, because our stomach isn't expanding with all those calorie dense foods. What we need to consider is less calorie dense food sources in these cases that fill up our stomach, and they don't put a lot of nutrients, as many nutrients in our body. So like iceberg lettuce, as an example, is one that fills you up without putting a lot of nutrients in, or celery. Now if you just pour a bunch of olive oil on those things, or peanut butter, celery, then that kind of counteracts each other. But that's probably as deep into the nutritional side as I can really get. But that's really what it boils down to, is balancing that out. And it's hard not to touch on this stuff when we're talking about activity too, because activity is energy output. So we've got to understand the energy input side of things a little bit. And that's basically what we're talking about when we talk about nutrition. So a lot of information that I got from that I kind of talked about today, I pulled from a book that is pretty darn good, I think. But it might be a little bit more. Really too much. Okay, it might be a little bit more fact dense. Sorry, it might be a little more fact dense than most people are willing to get into. However, the guy that wrote the book did a Google Talks presentation a while ago, and this is that presentation here. So it's Exercised is the name of the book, and it's called Why Something We Never Evolved to Do is Healthy and Rewarding. And his whole spiel is that, again, 150, 200 years ago, nobody was exercising. Nobody wanted to exercise. No one needed to exercise, because every calorie they wasted on exercise was a calorie that was going to be hard to get back later. But now our society is a little different, right? We need to exercise in order to take in the available calories that we have around us. So it's a relatively long presentation, but it's pretty good. And it goes into other topics outside of what I've discussed today, but it does touch base on the specifics of senility and aging. So this is a good resource for everybody. And then looking forward to other resources that we have, I want to kind of get back into some of the discussions that we've done before, build on those. So other things that we may be discussing coming up would be discussing the exercise pyramid. So getting into the differences between, we talked about cardiovascular fitness as being one, cardiovascular exercises, then strength training, but then also neurological system training, like neuromuscular training, more like a coordination-based exercise routine, and where those should fit into your routine. So the hope is that I can give people some information to help them build their own routine a little bit and understand it a little bit better. Another topic that we've talked a lot about is the science of balance and falls and avoiding falls as we age. That gets down to the neuromuscular system quite a bit. And so we can expand on that exercise pyramid talk with discussing ways to avoid falls as we get older. And that is so important because there are a few things that are so closely associated with mortality and increased morbidity with age as falling. When somebody falls and has a serious injury as a result of that fall, it sets them back quite a bit. I kind of look at it as you stop moving as much as you were before, and all of those diseases that are kind of chasing you get that opportunity to catch up. So it's not like the actual fall that is the issue. It's the being sedentary afterwards and not having that ability to recover quite as well as you once did. So avoiding them in the first place is good. And by avoiding them, you have to do things that make you stronger and that make you more coordinated, and it can help all across the body. Inflammation, we can talk a little bit more about that, systemic versus specific. And then other talks we've done, low back pain, lower body arthritis, and osteoporosis. These are all things that we can kind of reboot and get back into. Or we also have those resources up, so we can kind of discuss how we want to approach that. Definitely let Corey or Kat know, like, things that seem to speak to you as far as things that you would like to see more of, kind of spiraling out of these topics that we touched on today. And one, as we go through these things, I probably will bring in some of my other practitioners in the practice to help kind of expand upon these also, because we have other things such as like a balance program here that we may try to show a little bit of how we kind of approach things specifically here at Alliance. This is the information for our offices and clinics around. At this point, I don't have anything else left to build on. So I'd like to just kind of open it up to discussion. If anybody has a question, they can feel free to shoot it in the messages, or just unmute yourselves and let us know. Answered all the questions. And I'll put my, yeah, good job, Corey. Thanks. I'll put my email in the discussion too. I hope I spelled it right. Just so that if anybody has a question afterwards, feel free to reach out, let me know. And you can also reach out to Kat or Corey. They can get my information to you, and we can, again, any other ideas or anything you want me to discuss or talk about or get into more depth on, we can certainly do that. But we'll maybe try to plan a few more of these and see if there's anything else worth diving into after that.
Sounds great. And I did want to mention, I checked, and there are copies of that book, Exercise, Why Something We Never Evolved to Do Is Healthy and Rewarding, available in the Monroeville system, and I think there's one available in the Murraysville system as well.
Nice.
Thanks, Corey.
All right.
Colin.
Well,
yeah,
appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Colin.